Welcome to the Why Not Today podcast, a podcast that helps entrepreneurs take bold steps to start a business, get unstuck, or grow with more clarity, confidence, and courage. I'm Leslie Kane, a courage coach and the founder of the Why Not Today movement. I created this podcast in honor of my dad, Patrick Kane, whose favorite phrase was, "Why not today?" And that's become the guiding question in my life and business. Each week, you'll hear solo episodes where I coach through common business challenges and guest interviews that go beyond inspiration to teach you what actually works. Whether you're launching something new or navigating a pivot, you'll learn in each episode, you'll leave each episode with a clear next step and a reminder that you're not alone. And let's dive into Why Not Today, the podcast that helps you grow with courage and by taking action. And just FYI, I do not edit these episodes. And I think that's part of the Why Not Today message that you just got to do it. It's not going to be perfect. You just got to start. And so my guest today is Rohit Bhargava. Did I do that right?
You did. That was great.
Okay. And I met him in May. He was the keynote speaker at the Loudon Economic Development Summit. And I promised Alberto I would shout him out. So, Alberto, I guess, got you there. And
Yep.
you were an amazing speaker and just so energetic, and had a couple of books that I've read one of. I have the other one sitting here ready to read. And so, as I usually do, I ask, and you said yes. So, I'm excited to have you here as our guest to share. Got some cool ups and downs in your journey, and I love your book, which I do have. I haven't read this one yet, The Marketing and Branding Without a Budget, but I have read, and I love the premise, Non-Obvious Thinking. And so we're going to talk about ups and downs and courage and all those things. So introduce yourself a little about who you are and a fun fact.
Yeah, great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invite. And
Welcome.
let me start with my fun fact, which I think
Okay.
relates to what I do and what I am now, which is that I used to play drums a lot
Okay.
in like bands and drum set. And one of the things about drum set that you have to learn pretty quickly is that you have to figure out how to get your left foot, your right hand, and your left hand to all do something different at the same time. Limb independence, basically. It's like a central skill to being able to play the drum set.
Hmm.
And I use it
Count just
sometimes
it.
as yeah, you gotta like, it's about keeping the beat, but it's like all those pieces together, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a great metaphor for what entrepreneurs have to do, and what we eventually have to learn to do, all of us, in terms of juggling all the different things in our life. And so now I'm the founder of two businesses. One is the Non-Obvious Company, which is my company where I do a lot of the speaking and workshops and stuff that I do around trying to teach people how to be non-obvious thinkers. And the second one is a company that I co-founded with my wife called IdeaPress Publishing, which is a publishing company for nonfiction business books. We've done over 100 books to date, including my own. And so juggling all of those things, plus being a dad with two boys, like that is life. And I
Yeah.
think that's sort of what describes me. And I think drumming was a accidental introduction to that.
Yeah, and that's pretty smart because, yeah, we do. I said recently when I've been talking to people that it seems like we are all like when I meet somebody and ask, you used to say, "How are you?" and they'd say busy. Now I think the word I hear more often is overwhelmed. And I use the analogy the other day, we're spinning plates, having balls in the air, all at the same time. Oh, and wearing too many hats, and
Yeah.
wondering why it doesn't all go super smoothly. All the things. So, well, I loved your book and I'm excited to have you here. And I didn't know the drum thing. That's kind of fun. So, and I forgot to even, or I did say how we met. I always talk about the connections. And it's kind of funny. Another connection is I used to, until just recently, book music for a local restaurant and bar, not because I'm in the music scene, but because I know people. And it's funny, every time I would meet someone there, they were in a band. I'm like, of course you are. Or you know somebody in a band.
Yep.
Amazing
That
how
was
they
my
connect.
high school, basically. Everybody was in a band and everybody played instruments.
And did you grow up in Northern Virginia or
I did. Yeah.
where'd you go to high school?
Potomac School in McLean.
Okay. Yeah, I went to Herndon, so
Yep.
haven't gone far.
Yeah, I
But
mean, I left for pretty much all my 20s and I was living out overseas. And so I was gone for a long time and then I ended up back here.
okay. No, I've stayed here. I've been in Reston, except for college. I've been here, but I traveled lots of different places. So, well, let's get into courage. So, what does courage mean to you?
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you said this is how we're going to start off. So I guess
Mhm.
my definition is that courage is standing up for what you think, even when a lot of people might disagree with you, or it might be difficult. And that's what I would say my short description would be.
Okay, love it. And it's so true. And I think you've had lots and just what you shared in your journey of, doing what you wanted to do and creating a business and a life and all things. So, and it's interesting, the publishing arm too. My guest, I host a luncheon every month, and my guest last month, who I think Sam Horn, was going to talk about clarity, and people had already heard her speak about that. So she pivoted very quickly. And the question we asked everybody, if you were going to write a book, what would it be? And then she gave us tips and information on writing a book. So it's on my list, not anywhere near the top, but eventually. So I will definitely connect with you on that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think that a lot of us, when we get to a certain point, we have some sort of insight. It's like a book is a great way to just crystallize it for ourselves, right? Because
Right.
when you have to put it into a book, you have to create some sort of structure around it. You have to maybe ask yourself questions that you wouldn't ordinarily ask
Yeah.
to try and dissect why you think what you think, which is a valuable thing for anybody to do,
Right. And you never know who that one person is that needs to hear it.
right?
So, all right. So let's talk about your journey, your courage journey. Did you have some courage moments, or why not say moments, as I call them, those pivotal points that you made a decision that totally took your life in a different trajectory? Um, I mean, you shared at the event your story, but I want you to share, how'd you get to non-obvious thinking? And I love the name.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that came much later for me.
Okay.
But I'd say my first big moment that I can think of as part of my journey was deciding when I was 23 years old that I wanted to leave the US and live somewhere else. And I decided on Australia for a couple of reasons. One
Wow.
was that the Olympics was coming there, and I knew it was going to be a lot of high energy and fun. And I'd gone to college in Atlanta where the Olympics were. So I just experienced that. And I thought, well, this is an amazing vibe. Everyone's excited. There's high energy. Like, I love a place that is preparing for the Olympics. It's just a cool thing.
Yeah.
Australia spoke English,
Hmm.
and later discovered they speak Australian, which is not quite English, but it's close enough. So I wouldn't have to learn a new language. And I thought that would
Right.
be easy, easier at least. And so I eventually applied for a working visa and waited 9 months, waited tables, and earned enough money to go to pay for a ticket to go. And when I got the visa, I bought a one-way ticket and I went. And I didn't
Yeah.
have a job. I didn't know anybody. And I
And that takes
figured, let me
courage.
just try
Burn the
and,
boat, right?
yeah, let me just try it and see what happens. I mean, I'm 23. Like, what's the worst thing that happens? I fail and I go back home and live with my parents, right? I mean, that's my biggest like negative cost. And I thought I would stay for 2 years, and I ended up eventually finding a job and getting an apartment, and making some friends and really loving it, and got my start in the world of advertising and marketing. And I eventually stayed for 5 years and got my citizenship and everything. So I
Wow.
stayed for much longer than I thought I would, and really built a life there. And so I learned a lot about myself, and now it's kind of part of my story that, and people are really, I didn't think it was that crazy at the time. I mean, I traveled a lot as a kid, so traveling to a new country on my own was not that intimidating. I'd done a lot of travel. But now when people hear that, they're like, "What? You bought a one-way ticket and you just went and you didn't know
Yeah, see,
anybody?" Like
that
they
seems scary
really,
to me.
yeah, they assign a lot of credibility to that. They're like, "Wow, that's amazing." Like, I would never do that. When I don't know that that's true. Like, I think that we all have, I mean, this is what you talk about, right? Like, we all
Yeah,
have a moment in our life where we would do something we didn't think we would do.
right. Love that. And courage means so many different things to other people, and some things that seem scary to you, easy for somebody else. It was interesting. I was going over the Bay Bridge one time with some friends. An older woman, she goes, "Doesn't this scare you?" I'm like, "No, going to Wegmans is a little overwhelming. That scares me. But going across the Bay Bridge, easy peasy." Because as a kid, we traveled a lot, but in the car. So getting in a car and going on a road trip is nothing for me. Um,
Yeah, I mean, we all have things that scare us that don't scare other people and vice versa, right? So
and
I
I
I
think
mean,
it's
as a public speaker, like that's supposedly one of the biggest fears that a lot of people have, standing up in front of 2,000 people and saying something is like terrifying to them. I
yeah,
don't find that terrifying, but I do find something like scuba diving to be terrifying. Like, there's no way I would be under that much water. Like, I would panic immediately,
yeah,
which is the first thing you're not supposed to do when you go scuba
right.
diving. So I would
Yeah.
never do that. And some
So
people
were
are
you
like, this is the
always
best thing ever,
comfortable?
and they would always do it, right?
Were you always comfortable being a public speaker, or did you grow into that?
I definitely grew into being good at it. But I don't think I ever had sort of panic when I had to get up in front of the classroom to like present something. Like I wasn't like a natural or a ham or anything like that, but I never found it to be like a super intimidating thing to do. Like if I had to stand up in front of 10 people or 20 people and present something, I'm like, okay, I'll do it. I wasn't that good at it, but it
Right.
didn't induce panic for me.
Yeah, I almost didn't graduate from college because I'd take public speaking, and that terrified me. Now, put me in front of 10,000. Not that I've spoke to that many, but I could. I'd be fine with it.
Yeah. See, and you grow into it, like
Perfect.
you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, how did you came back here, obviously. Um,
I
and
did.
when did the book come, or how? I know there was a restaurant up and down.
Um, big believer that everybody in their life should go and wait tables at some point. Because I think that it's such a great education about understanding people. Like some people are just angry at you, like fairly, and it is what it is. And I think that insights getting if you start with people in the moment that they're there and you can do your best and sometimes they have a great experience and sometimes they're just they who are whoever they are and so for me that was the restaurant experience and that's what I think started me towards this path of knowing that I was pretty good at understanding people. Like that was the common theme in my work, even when it got into advertising. Like in order to do great advertising and marketing, you have to have an understanding of human psychology.
Yeah.
And a lot of the work that I did was really about that. And the way non-obvious came about is that I started writing, and that brought me to this perspective of I have to be able to say something that no one else is saying. I have to be original and unique. I can't just be cliche and say the same thing as everyone else and agree with everyone else. Like I'm never gonna stand out if I'm the same guy on the same panel saying the same thing as everyone else.
So, at what point did you start the business? Is the first business not obvious thinking, or did it evolve to that?
They sort of started simultaneously. I did not call the business the non-obvious company at
Okay.
first. I actually called it the Influential Marketing Group,
Okay.
IMG for short. And that started in 2015. And that was when I left my gig at Ogilvy and my full-time job. So up until 2015, I was an employee, full-time employee of someone else.
Okay.
I wrote two books while I was an employee of
Okay.
someone else. And then eventually I started the Influential Marketing Group. And that same year in 2015, I published Non-Obvious, the book. And
Okay.
that one hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list and really took off and put a lot of gravitas behind this concept of non-obvious and non-obvious thinking, which eventually would be a book 10 years ago, that 10 years later, which is the one that you're reading now. And so it was a couple of years after 2015 when I changed the name of the company to the Non-Obvious Company. I trademarked the brand of Non-Obvious and I really expanded it. So it became more than just the books. It became a podcast and the Non-Obvious Book Awards and the Non-Obvious Insights newsletter and just the Non-Obvious meetups and Non-Obvious dinners. And so like we do all of
Wow.
these different things that are part of now the ecosystem of non-obvious and non-obvious thinking. And so it's more than just a book or a talk.
Right. I need to look into all the things you're doing. Sounds like we're going similar tracks. I started with Why Not Today, and it's going into all different things: podcast, lunch,
Yeah,
events.
that's what happens. That's what happens.
Yeah.
And we finally bought nonobvious.com from the guy who
Okay.
had been sitting on it for, I don't know, 15 years or whatever. So once we got the domain, then it's like, okay, now we have a home. We can put everything at nonobvious.com, and that's where people
Awesome.
can find out.
Yeah. So give me a definition, or what's your big umbrella of what non, I mean, everybody can have a different idea of what non-obvious is, and maybe it's just not obvious. So what is
Yeah,
non-obvious thinking?
I do kind of think it is that. I mean, the promise that I share from the podcast and the newsletter is that non-obvious thinking will help you be more interesting.
Okay.
And so it is kind of about curiosity. It's kind of about challenging your perceptions or challenging your assumptions. It's about seeing what no one else sees, seeing what everyone else misses. All of those are good definitions for what the power of non-obvious thinking is. Creativity, unusual solutions, new directions. I mean, that's kind of why I think this is so important. And it's not just for people in creative professional roles. I think it's also for anyone who is trying to find unusual solutions to challenges or to stand out at work.
Yeah. So what's a good example from something you've done or somebody else of a non-obvious thinking that was
Oh, there's a
good?
ton. I mean, it's one of the things I talk about in the book, in the non-obvious thinking book, is find an option C. So people will often give you a scenario where they're like, "Well, do you want this or do you like that? Like, which one is better?" Like I was just speaking at an event in Peru, and two of their most famous dishes are ceviche and lomo saltado. And so they asked me on stage, they're like, "Which one do you prefer, ceviche or lomo saltado?" And I was like, "Well, I would choose lomo saltado, which is like a stew of beef. But my real favorite is pisco sour." And everyone started clapping, right? Because that's their national drink. And it's an
Okay.
alcoholic drink. And it's great. And so that's a small example, but
Yeah.
anytime you're faced with that type of situation where someone's like, pick this or this, you're like, well, ask yourself the question, like, are those really my only two options? Like, is there an
Let's
option C here?
see.
Because that's non-obvious thinking. Like that's what non-obvious thinkers do. They don't just take the two options they're given and say, well, I'll take this one, even though I don't like either.
Yeah. And ask for something different.
Right.
So, all right. So you've got a very successful business now. What were some things you wish you would have known? Actually, let me go back. Did you quit your job with the business rolling already, or did you quit your job and just jump like you kind of did when you went to Australia?
Well, let's just say I didn't exactly quit.
Okay. You were asked to
Um,
leave.
yeah, basically. But yeah, I started the business and the goal was I sort of set myself a financial target. And I was like, because I have two younger kids at that point, right? Now they're older. But at that point, it's being a dad and two kids, like you got responsibilities, right?
Mhm.
So I'm like, let me see if I can make enough money doing my own thing with speaking gigs and consulting and all this stuff to replace what I would have made in my job uh, over the first year. And if I can't make the same money or approximately the same money doing this on my own with all the freedom of being an entrepreneur and all the hustle that comes with it, then I'll go back and I'll look for a full-time job. And when I made the same amount in the first 2 months of the year, I was like, okay, I should probably be doing this instead
Mhm.
of the other stuff working for somebody else.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty clear financial signal. And by the way, it wasn't, when I tell that story, people are like, oh, you're just, you must be really great. And it wasn't so much that, I think, as it was the fact that when I started my own business, I was 40 years old. And becoming an entrepreneur at 40 is actually beautiful because you have a network. Like people know you, you have a reputation. If you've done good work, if you have a good body
Right.
of work and a good network of connections, you're not going to struggle in the same way that a 22-year-old without any of those connections is going to struggle when they start a business. And so I'm a big fan of later in life entrepreneurship. Now, some people may be listening to that and be like, well, you're only 40. That's not really later. And some people be like, wow, that is really late, right? Because we tend to think of entrepreneurs as the 20 something year old that dropped out of college and started a business or somebody who was singularly entrepreneurial and could never be an employee. And I was both. Like I worked for other people for 20 years before I decided to start my own business. And now I would never go back. I'm totally unemployable at this stage because I'm now fully an entrepreneur. But I wasn't born that way. Like I wasn't that way
Were
through
your
high school and
were your
college and
parents
like
entrepreneurs?
no,
Did they-
no.
No.
My dad spent 35 years working at the World Bank,
Okay.
same company for 35 years, and then he retired. So
Okay.
he was, I mean, different generation, obviously, but
Yeah, well, and I've watched with helping lots of people build businesses that I've noticed that often when somebody has an entrepreneur spirit, they came from an entrepreneur family. Like my dad owned his own business, so that's what I
that
watched.
is very common. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was not my story, but I think that is going to be at least one and maybe both of my son's stories because the time that I was an entrepreneur was basically during their kind of, 7 to 17 age range, which is a
Yeah.
pretty formative time
Yeah.
for
They're
any
watching.
kid, right? Because they don't really remember me being an employee. That was, when they were 7. Like that was a long time ago for them.
And probably one of the best gifts I think parents can give kids is to be an entrepreneur and working at home and them watching you. Because somebody goes to an office, they have no idea what mom or dad does. But when they see you and they see you working and they see you developing in your skills and listening, I had one time I had a contractor in here working on my house doing replacing a wall and some pipes. And I'm working in the background making calls, doing stuff, and he's like, "You're good." Like, because he listened. You go to an office, they have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean that is true. I don't want to overly romanticize it though either because there is some real downsides, right? Like
Yeah.
there's nobody telling you that you're off the clock. When you're an entrepreneur,
True.
like you can end up working really long hours, longer than if you're working in a really taxing job even.
Absolutely.
And you can struggle to know when to switch it off, right? And these are all real struggles for any entrepreneur, especially when you're trying to be an entrepreneur and a dad or a mom at the same time.
Yeah, and that's
So
something
those
I've
are
struggled with.
struggles too.
Yeah, I've struggled with it, and I'm single and I don't have kids, so my can work all the time. And so I've started doing, I call it my toes in the sand tour every month, trying to go to a beach or a lake or somewhere, taking time off.
Yeah, good for you.
And then that's one of the things I teach and coach people on, support people on is, how do you have a schedule? How do you turn it off? Because the best thing about owning your own business is not having a boss. And the worst thing about owning your own business is not having a boss.
Yeah, and I think that there's again, going with the option C, right? It's either work less or work more, or find a way to integrate your work into your family, right? So
Right.
now sometimes when I have a speaking gig somewhere interesting, like we'll take the family and we'll make it a trip. When we're exhibiting at a trade show, like I'll bring the boys and they'll be stacking the books in the booth and they'll see how it works. So we found ways to integrate those so it's not just either I work a lot and make more money or I work less, make less money, but I have more time for my family. It's, let's integrate this into some sort of a lesson or something for the boys and have them be part of it. And also, I mean, I will say that it's been really interesting and something that sometimes people want to talk about, the idea of having a company with your wife or with your spouse or your partner and working together. And we both work from home, right? So you have that whole dynamic where it's like, we see each other a lot.
Mhm.
And some people, especially when COVID happened, they were like, well, we can't deal with this much time together. Like, I
Used to
like you
be
better when
separate.
you were on the road every 2 or 3 days. Like,
Exactly.
then we could be okay. But, and I was, as a speaker, I traveled a lot, right? So it
Yeah.
was a dynamic for us to shift and change. And it's not always easy for people.
All right. So you just started, your volume just went way down.
Oh, okay. I don't think I touched anything.
I don't know what happened, but you got really light. And we're not
Let
going
me,
to edit, so it's going to get fixed.
yeah,
Okay,
let me see if
that's
I,
fine now.
is it
That's
good?
good.
Okay. I won't
Yeah.
touch anything then.
Yeah. It just went really down.
Yeah, really weird. Okay. Sorry about that.
All right. So what's something you wish you would have known when you started?
When I started, I really focused on skills, like my own skills, like being better at whatever the thing was, learning how to do new things. And what I wish I appreciated more was how important it was to build my network,
Mm,
to know people and for people to know me, and the human connection. I always kind of knew that was important, but I don't think I ever appreciated earlier in my career exactly how important it is. And now that I'm a little bit later, I joke sometimes that when I was younger, it was all about like networking to get to know new people. And now my challenge is remembering who I already know that I haven't spoken to in like 10 years
yeah.
that
And you
could be
do
a great
have,
connection for
yeah.
whatever I'm working on, right?
Yeah.
So it's the dual challenge. It's not that I don't want to meet new people. I meet new people all the time. I'm at, 35, 40 events a year. But I also have some amazing connections with people who we just haven't talked in 3, 4, 5 years.
Right.
And so I have to constantly find new ways to reconnect with them. And I have some ways that work for me to do that. Like, for example, when I'm traveling to a city, like I go to Chicago, for example, and speak at a speaking event, I have to show up the day before. So that evening, I'll host a non-obvious dinner and I'll just go through my social media and I'll see who do I know in Chicago that I haven't caught up with for a while. And I'll just send them a random message and say, hey, I'm going to be in Chicago on this date. We're going to be at this restaurant. I'd love for you to come if you can make it. And I'll host a dinner and I'll introduce people to one another. And it's been amazing. Like the last time I did that, I reconnected with someone who I used to work with in Australia 20 years ago that I hadn't seen for 20 years. But
Wow.
he left Australia and he was now living in Chicago. And so we reconnected. And that sort of thing happens because someone in all of our networks has to be the one that says, I'm going to organize this. I will be here at this time. It's not a high pressure thing. If you can make it, great. I'd love to see you. If you can't, we'll find another time to do it. And
Yeah.
that was it. That's the vibe. That's it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's the connections, which I'm all about is connections. And I start this episode with how did we connect and how did we meet? But then also, it's so much fun to see the connections. And it's interesting. I don't know if you've ever done this, like somebody in your life, you go back to, if you hadn't done this, you wouldn't have all these, like I went to spring break in the Outer Banks, my sophomore year in college. And because of that and meeting one person, I can't tell you how many people I've met because of that one encounter.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
um,
I think we all have that. Like I have,
yeah.
when I first moved to Australia and I didn't know anybody, I went during the Olympics, I went to a show in a theater. And as I was coming out of that show, someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, did you go to Emory, like for college?" And I did. And she said, "I think we were in a class together." And she remembered me. It was a couple years after I graduated and she had graduated also. And it happens that she was living in Australia at the time.
Yeah.
And we just connected there and we became great friends and we would hang out all the time during the time that I was living there. And we saw each other because we happened to be at the same theater show, which, I mean, if
Well,
I didn't go to that show, right,
I'm
maybe that
having dinner
connection
tomorrow
doesn't
night.
happen, right?
I'm having dinner tomorrow night with somebody that I went to grad school with. That we finished grad school and then we even went to Cancun afterwards to celebrate and then just lost touch. And somebody that came to my luncheon that knew Sam Horn posted about the luncheon and she reached out to me on Facebook. And I'm like, "Okay, how do I know you?" She's like, "We went to grad school." I'm like, 30 years ago. But
Yeah,
we're having dinner tomorrow night. So yeah, I love those
good for
connections.
you. That's great.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
reaching out, you just never know. So obviously it wasn't start here and be successful. Any bumps in the road, things that you learned that you could share with somebody, tips for somebody thinking, I want to start a business, or I've started a business and I'm stuck, or I need to pivot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that there's been a couple. I mean, one would be COVID happening. And for me particularly, I mean, at the time that everything closed, my speaking career was starting to take off. And I was about to take the stage at a huge event that was going to be huge for me in front of several thousand people. And I knew that there was going to be a lot of other people who plan events there. And 2 weeks before that event, everything got shut down for COVID and the event was canceled.
Mm,
And all of a sudden, all this momentum that I had went away. And obviously, all live events went away for at
right.
least a year and actually longer than that. And so, as a professional speaker who makes money going to traveling to events and charging money to speak, like all of a sudden, this huge kind of aspect of revenue and opportunity just went away. And that was really tough. And one of the things that really saved me was that I had enough diversification because I have these two businesses. So I had the speaking, which went to basically zero. I mean, you made a little bit of money on virtual talks, but
Right.
not much. And at the same time, I had this publishing company, and all of these people who were in the same scenario as me, who are professional speakers and also write books, said, "Well, we can't speak now, so what are we going to do? Write a book."
You have time to write books.
Right. So the publishing company started taking off and the inquiries started taking off because all of a sudden everybody who was too busy to write a book and only wrote a book once every 3 or 4 years said, well, now's the perfect time. Let me go and write the book. And that really helped because it was a big pivot for me because I wasn't spending that much time in publishing before, but I started spending a lot more time and it helped me to hone the vision of what we wanted IdeaPress to be. Because we could easily, at that moment, we had a fork in the road. We could easily, in that moment, have said, well, let's become a book factory like some other publishers out there and everything that comes in. If they can, if they have the right pieces of the puzzle and they can bring us in to do the book, we're going to do the book. And the more volume, the better. It's a volume game. And we'll have one or two books that become great hits, and that's where we make all the money, and everything else we kind of basically break even, make a little bit of money, and it's fine. But I never wanted to be a book factory. I didn't want to spread my time that thinly, and I wanted to actually know the authors that I was working with and be part of the team. And I personally, my time doesn't scale to do that with 100 books. So we set a cap and we said we're only going to work on 20 to 25 books a year total, which is, quite concentrated.
Right.
And we've stuck to that over the last 5 years of growth. And when I say growth, our growth has not been by having more authors, it's been by having authors who have bigger books. And so our team has grown, our footprint has grown, but we've maintained that focus. And I think that's something I'm really proud of as an entrepreneur, because when you think about scaling your business, it's really easy to take some wrong steps and compromise what made the business good in the first place.
Right. And I think so many people definitely do that. I
Yeah.
love that you're sticking to it. So, how would you encourage somebody else? What's your word of advice? Somebody starting a business or having a business and just as me starting a new business a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Well, I think it ties to your theme of why not today. Like I think a lot of times what people do is they hold themselves back because they feel like right now is better and they don't want to jeopardize that, or right now is safer and they don't want to jeopardize that. And what we're not that good at is appreciating the cost of doing nothing. So I think that what we have to find a way to do is say, well, if I don't do this, that's going to be bad for me. It's not going to be good or safe. It's going to be bad. And here's why it's going to be bad, because I'm going to lose the opportunity, because I'm going to burn myself out, because I'm not going to capitalize on this thing and someone else is going to do it instead. Like whatever the rationale you find, you have to create a cost of doing nothing in your head, because, or maybe on paper. Because if you don't have that, then it feels like doing nothing is the safer, better bet, because you know what the risks are of doing something, right? I waste too
Yeah.
much money. I hire the wrong people. I can't get any clients. I, piss off my partner because I spent our savings on this thing, right? Like we know what the costs of doing something are, but we don't typically appreciate any cost of doing nothing. So you have to make that visible for yourself.
That's so smart. And everything you're saying is so aligned with how I grew up and my thinking. And, I quit a corporate job 30 years ago and had not, or 25 years, had not replaced my salary. But I'm like, you know what? I know how to hustle. I know how to sell and I can replace it. And 6 months later, my dad had a major stroke and I was able to be there. And thank goodness I was.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
speaking of my dad, as we close this up, I always try to say, uh, how are you connected? And people are like, I never met your dad. How the heck am I? Well, if I put an eye patch and a handlebar mustache on you, you would be my dad. And you're thinking there's so much about what you just said. I could do a whole podcast.
I kind of
Um,
want the AI version of that now. I want to see what that looks like.
Now we could do that. We'll do that. Well, it might be fun. So, but he was definitely a non-obvious thinker. Never put that two together until you just said that. At his eulogy, my brothers talked about he was a planner by trade, and he had A, B, and he always had option C. And so
Mm,
he started. And the reason he had an eye patch, he got in a car accident the night he graduated from high school, and he was supposed to play football for USC. And because that happened, obviously he wasn't playing football. He was basically in a hospital for 6 months, almost died. So my grandfather put him on a train and sent him to Indiana to go to Notre Dame, from California. My mom grew up in South Bend, and that's where they met. And so, they talk about this is plan A,
yep.
B, and he always had a C, and he always um, was just thinking outside the box, like crazy thinking. When he had a stroke in 2000, I mean, he was unconscious again for months, and he would be talking, and he was very involved in bringing the metro to Reston and talking about commercial and residential all being mixed. And he would be talking, saying that, not very conscious. And they're like, oh yeah, he's still not here. But a lot of the things that he talked about 20 years ago, he worked with the town of Herndon, and they could never agree on anything, like in the 80s, and things that he talked about are happening now. Like he was such a forward thinker. And I found his obituary the other day, and just elected officials talking about his thinking was just so big. And then, talking about taking your kids on road trips. That's what we did. Um, my dad worked all over the
Mhm.
country. And so he would pack us up in the car and we'd go on his trips. And literally, when I was 16, they bought a camper, an RV, and we went for 5 weeks cross country. And we would go to whatever campsite and he'd get on the payphone at that point and work. Um, but that's how I grew up with him.
That
And
must
then,
be so fulfilling to see it come like full circle now with all these things being built and all these visions
yeah,
being
I mean, I
uh,
have a picture of him.
reality.
I have a picture of him with like floor plans, a blueprint of sitting above Tyson's Corner, looking out because he was working on the planning of Tyson's, and look where that is now. So all these
Wow.
cool things, it's like coming full circle. And then networking. I mean, the network, building your network. He was a master of that. He actually started the Reston Chamber, not because he had local business, but he was raising 6 kids in this community and wanted to
Yeah.
have a
Wow.
network for us.
Yeah,
So
he sounds amazing.
yeah. So wish you could have met him. He was a very cool guy. And just make you think, like I had friends that said he made them think more than than their parents ever did, or had more conversation with my father than they ever did their own father.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it was annoying as his daughter. You trying to do homework? I'm like, what's the answer? He's like, well, let's really think about this. I'm like, no, just give me the answer. It's 10 o'clock at night. But he definitely made us think out the box. And
Yeah.
yeah, you
What a
obviously
great gift to give to your family and to your daughter to do that.
yeah, and you're doing that with your sons, so they're watching that. You
Yeah.
have no idea what they're catching, but
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes you see glimpses of it and you're like, hey, that's pretty good.
yeah. So, and it's interesting. I'm the only entrepreneur of the 6 of us kids, but my
Mm.
brothers are in sales. Everybody's in relationship of some kind of business, people business.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being my guest, and I can't wait to talk more and find out more about these non-obvious dinners. And I know you had mentioned at this as you closed your keynote about a way to introduce or ask people about themselves.
Yes.
What was that called?
Yeah, so we came up with this technique. I was at all of these different events, and what typically happened was people would listen to someone on stage, me, and then somebody else on stage, and then there'd be some sort of networking break or a coffee break or something like that. And those are really intimidating moments for people because now you have like 10 minutes to introduce yourself super quickly and try and compress yourself into a 10-second pitch. And we would walk away just with surface level connections or just like learning somebody's title or where they live or stuff like that. So we came up with this concept called the non-obvious 7-minute meetup. And the idea was in 7 minutes, you go to somebody who is a stranger that you don't know, and you ask them one question. And the one question is, what's something non-obvious about you?
Okay.
And when they give you the answer, then you ask them a storytelling question about it, which is a question designed to get them to tell you a story. So, not a yes or no question, a
Right.
sort of question a journalist would ask, like an open ended question. And after 3 minutes, you switch and they ask you what's something non obvious about you. And what we started seeing after doing these 7-minute meetups at all of these different events is people would make these amazing connections with one another. They would feel connected, they would bond, they would start a podcast together afterwards. They would like go to lunch and hang out. Like two people started dating. It's not meant to be romantic in nature, but
Right.
things happen.
Yeah.
um, so all of these connections that were happening just over 7 minutes. And what I realized is that sometimes it's not that people can't or won't do this or that they're too introverted. It's that someone who has the audience from the stage has to give them permission to be this version of themselves. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, I'm on stage. I could do that. And that's kind of where this theory came from of introducing these meetups. And so far at events, it's been working amazingly.
I love that. And again, it aligns with everything I do that I host this non-traditional networking. I should change it to the non-obvious networking at luncheon. And I never let anybody give elevator speeches. That's part of it. And so based on my speaker, everybody introduces themselves with an answer to a question. So when I had somebody wrote a book about her father's list, she found her dad's bucket list after he passed away. Everybody talked about a bucket, what their bucket list. Sam asked, if you're going to write a book, what would be the subject? Um,
Right.
so I've thought about doing um, a luncheon on this theme. The whole thing is the non-obvious meetup luncheon.
Yeah, I've got a actually I've got a one page like how to host your own 7-minute meetup
Okay.
document. So it's a PDF and you can just download it off the website and
Well,
it's
might be
like here's
a new
everything.
thing.
Yeah.
So love the idea. Well, thank you again. This has been so informative. I've learned so much about you, and um, you got great things going on. And um, if people want the book, Amazon, all the places.
Yep, you got it. Amazon bookstores, and you can find out about all of it, and also subscribe to the weekly newsletter, which comes out every Thursday, and it's the most interesting, non-obvious stories of the week. All of that you can get at nonobvious.com.
Okay, and I'll share all your info in the show notes.
Yeah,
So
great.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining the Why Not Today podcast, your space for practical tools, real encouragement, and courageous growth. Whether you're launching something new or navigating a pivot, I hope you're leaving today's episode with a new, clear next step and a reminder that you're not alone. This podcast is your bridge from inspiration to action, and I'm here to walk you with you through every step of the way. And remember, anything you want to know about Why Not Today is on whynotTodayMovement.com, and share this with a friend if it speaks to you, and connect with us, because why not today? So thanks again for sharing.